All right, so now we will be finding slope and something called the Y-intercept from a set of graphs and also from a set of equations. So let's talk about what a Y-intercept is. A Y-intercept is where your line is going to cross the y-axis. So it's the point that the line crosses the y-axis. We use the variable b to represent y-intercept. All right, so if you see b, that means y-intercept. Now, we are going to be finding the slope and the y-intercept of each line from a graph. So when we are finding slope and y-intercept, or when we're finding slope from a graph, we are going to use, remember, rise over run. You are more than welcome to use the slope formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. However, that's going to take you a little bit longer. So a little shortcut is to use that slope formula of rise over run. So to find the slope, what we're going to do in each one of these graphs is we're going to pick 2 points from the graph. We want to pick whole number points. So for example, number 1, I can pick this point here, and I could pick this point here. And it does not matter which 2 points you pick, you would get the same slope. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start at one of those points. It does not matter which one. I'm going to start at the bottom point. And we're going to do rise, which means I'm going to go vertically up. So now I'm even with my other pink point. And then I'm going to draw a line for my run, which is horizontally, to meet my other pink point. Now, I went up 1. Going up 1 is a positive 1. And then I went over 2 towards the positive side. Positive side is to the right on my graph. So that's a positive 2. So my slope is my rise, which was 1, over my run, which was 2. I'm going to show you if you did start at the top point, you would still get the same slope, because I would need to go down 1, which would be a negative 1, to get even with my bottom point. And then I would need to go over 2 to the left, which would be going over negative 2. And a negative 1 divided by a negative 2 still gets you that positive 1/2 slope. I'm also going to show you, well, what happens if we didn't choose those 2 points? What happens if we decided to choose 2 other points? Maybe we chose this point here and this point here. Well, I would need to go up 2 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, which a slope of 2/4 reduces to 1/2. So we do still get the same slope regardless of which 2 points we choose. I'm going to redraw my work for this. This is how you show your work on this problem. You just draw your rise and your run, label your rise and your run. In this case, it would be 1/2. Now your y-intercept is B. Your B is where your line crosses the y-axis. Well, the y-axis is this vertical line that I'm highlighting in green here. So where my line crosses that y-axis is this point. So that point is the point 0, 3. All right. So now, and actually it just asked for B. And when it just asks for B, we just want to write down the 3. That's it. Okay. So number 2, I'm actually going to redraw that line for you guys because it looks like it might have moved as we were printing this out. It actually should be this line here. Okay, so let's do that. So now I'm going to pick 2 points on that line. So I'm going to pick this point here and this point here, and I'm going to find the slope. So I'm going to do rise over run. It does not matter which points you start at. I'm going to start with my bottom point. I need to go up 1 to get even with my top point. So up 1 is a positive 1. And I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3 to the left, which means I'm going over negative 3. So my slope is my rise over run, which is a negative 1/3. And now's actually a good point to talk about negatives. A negative 1/3 like this, and a negative 1/3 like this, and a negative 1/3 like this all mean the same thing. So it does not matter where you write that negative symbol. I do not care, but I'm going to write it like this, negative 1/3. So I'm going to write the negative kind of even with the fraction line. And then now we're going to find the y-intercept, which is where it crosses the y-axis. The y-axis is what I'm highlighting in green right now. And the line crosses the y-axis here, which is a b value of 0. The point is 0, 0, but we're going to just write 0. All right, so slope for my next one. All right, well, if we go back to my previous lesson, we had a slope that was undefined. And I told you guys that a slope that's undefined is a vertical line on the graph. Well, now we're dealing with a horizontal line on the graph. And so if I pick 2 points on this line, to get from this point that I highlighted in yellow to the other point, I do a rise of 0 and a run of negative 2. Well, a rise of 0 over a run of negative 2 gives you a slope of 0. A horizontal line will always have a slope of 0. And now we're going to find the y-intercept, which is where it crosses the y-axis. I'm highlighting the y-axis in green right now. And where my line crosses the y-axis, it's this point here. Now we need to be careful. We need to go by the scale of the graph. That is a y value of negative 4. And the actual point is 0, negative 4. Notice a trend. Your x value is always 0 when we're talking about a y-intercept. So, but we are just going to write down the y value of the y-intercept. Okay, so then number 4, I'm going to pick 2 points on the graph. It does not matter which 2 points you pick. I'm going to pick this point and this point. And now I'm going to do rise over run. I'm going to start at my bottom point. It does not matter which point you start at. I go up 2, which means a rise of positive 2, and I go over 1 to the left, which means negative 1. So my slope is 2 over negative 1, which 2 divided by negative 1 is a slope of negative 2. My y-intercept, I'm going to highlight my y-axis in green. Where my line crosses my y-axis is this point here, which is the y value of 5. Remember, this is really technically the point 0, 5. The x value is always 0 when we're dealing with a y-intercept. All right, now we're going to start to learn about forms of linear equations. So slope-intercept form is a type of linear equation. We're going to learn about 3 types of different linear equations in this unit. And this is in the form of y is equal to mx plus b. So m, remember, is your slope. So in slope-intercept form, your slope is your coefficient of x. And remember, b is your y-intercept. And something important to note is that y is always isolated when we are dealing with slope-intercept form. So remember that word isolated means that it's alone by itself with a coefficient of 1. So an example of a linear equation in slope-intercept form would be something like this. Y is equal to 3/2 x plus 2. Y is isolated, so that's how I know this is in slope-intercept form. And my coefficient of x is my slope, so 3/2 would be my slope. And my constant is my y-intercept, so my y-intercept would be positive 2. So slope-intercept form is useful to us because we can easily identify the slope and we can easily identify the y-intercept when our equation is in this format. So number 5 through 10 ask us to identify the slope and the y-intercept from each equation? Well, number 5, we cannot do that because y is not isolated. We need to isolate y. Now, when I isolate y, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. This is exactly why we did literal equations, because this is technically a literal equation. When I divide both sides by 2, I need to divide both the 6x by 2 to get a 3x and the minus 4 by 2 to get a minus 2, because there's multiple terms on this side. I need to divide all terms by 2. Now, since y is isolated, my slope is my coefficient of x, so my slope is 3. My constant is my y-intercept. We need to be careful, it's a negative 2. All right, looking at number 6. Y is not isolated, so this is not in slope-intercept form yet. I'm going to add 2 to both sides to get y isolated. And I have a negative 3x plus a 2 on the other side. My coefficient of x is my slope. My constant is my y-intercept. Number 7, I need to isolate y, so I'm going to solve for y by first subtracting 10x from both sides. And I have a negative 2y is equal to, and I'm going to rewrite this as a negative 10x plus a 2, so that way I have it in mx plus b form. And now I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2, and remember, when I divide the other side by negative 2, I need to divide all the terms by negative 2. So I have y is equal to a negative 10x divided by a negative 2 is a positive 5x, and a positive 2 divided by a negative 2 is a negative 1. Y is isolated, and this is in slope-intercept form. My coefficient of x is my slope. My constant is my y-intercept. Moving on to number 8. This is actually in a form that we will learn in another lesson. This is called point-slope form, but we don't know that yet. So we're going to need to isolate y. This one's a little bit more tricky, though, because we do need to distribute this 3/2 in first. So I'm going to rewrite the y minus 5, and now distributing that 3/2 in, I get a 3/2 x plus, and a 3/2 times a 6, we do the 6 times the 3, which is an 18, and then we divide by 2, which comes out to be a 9. Continuing to isolate y, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So I wind up with y is equal to a 3/2 x plus a 14. Y is isolated. My coefficient of x is my slope. My constant is my y-intercept. Moving on to number 9, I'm going to start off by adding 3x to both sides. And I wind up with a 6y is equal to, and I'm going to rewrite this as a 3x plus a 9 to get it into mx plus b form. And now I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides. When I divide by 6 on the right side, a 3x divided by a 6 reduces into a 1/2x. And then plus a 9 divided by a 6 reduces into a 3/2. My coefficient of x is my slope. My constant is my y-intercept. All right, and then number 10, I'm going to subtract x from both sides. And I wind up with y is equal to, I'm going to rewrite this as a negative x plus a 0. You do not need to write the 0. It's up to you. You can leave it as just y is equal to negative x. It's up to you. So my coefficient of x in this case is negative 1, and my constant is 0, so that's my y-intercept. All right, this brings us to the end of your level 1 videos. So now move on to the practice.